Men of high intellect find satisfaction in themselves, mediocrities in others. Imagine a world where silence isn't emptiness, but clarity, where solitude isn't loneliness, but a form of protection. Imagine being so finely tuned to the chaos of the world that even casual conversation feels like a burden on the mind. Why is it that so many intelligent people, brilliant thinkers, inventors, artists, and philosophers prefer to be alone? Why does social life seem not like a source of pleasure, but a disturbance to their peace? And most importantly, what truth was Schopenhauer trying to convey when he insisted that solitude wasn't just a preference, but a necessity for a certain kind of mind? In this discussion, we're going to explore this deeply provocative idea that for many intelligent individuals, social life is not merely inconvenient, it's unbearable. We will walk through the mind of Arthur Schopenhauer and discover how his radical ideas help us understand the connection between intelligence, solitude, and inner freedom. By the end, you'll discover the most powerful insight of all, one that could entirely change the way you perceive your own need for quiet, space, and depth. But before we go further, I invite you to subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who values meaningful thought. Leave a comment below. Do you feel more energized alone or around others? Your answer might reveal more than you think. And trust me, the last part of this video holds the most shocking truth of all, one that very few ever realize. Let's begin. Arthur Schopenhauer, the 19th century German philosopher, was known not just for his sharp pessimism, but for his razor-cut insights into the nature of consciousness and society. To him, intelligence wasn't just about logic or memory. It was about perception in acute, sometimes painful awareness of reality. The more aware a person becomes, the more they begin to see what most people miss or ignore. They begin to see the shallow foundations of small talk, the ego games behind friendly gestures, and the unconscious cruelty hidden beneath social expectations. This awareness, though a gift, becomes a kind of burden. Schopenhauer once wrote, "The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him." Think about that for a moment. What he means is this: the more deeply you think, the more questions you ask. And the more questions you ask, the less satisfied you become with easy answers or superficial interactions. For highly intelligent individuals, daily social exchanges, chit-chat, gossip, and rituals of politeness can feel like a waste of mental energy. Not because they see themselves as superior, but because they crave truth, depth, and authenticity. Here's a question worth asking yourself. When was the last time you were in a group and felt truly seen or heard? If you are someone with a deep mind, you probably know the strange feeling of being surrounded by people yet mentally elsewhere, drifting in thought, disengaged from the noise. Schopenhauer argued that for such minds, solitude is not isolation, it's restoration. He wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. And if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom." This isn't about arrogance. It's about protecting the quality of your thoughts. For Schopenhauer and for many thinkers after him, the mind is like a delicate instrument. It plays beautifully in silence, but gets drowned in noise. Intelligent individuals often experience the world with greater sensitivity, not just emotionally, but intellectually. They detect contradictions, insincerity, and manipulation, and it exhausts them. The social world, with its performance and posturing, becomes a stage where they do not wish to act. Even in gatherings, such people often retreat inward. They may smile and participate, but inside they're observing patterns, predicting reactions, or simply waiting for the moment they can be alone again. This is not misanthropy. It's simply a misalignment between the depth they crave and the shallowness they experience. And this brings us to a crucial point. Society as it stands often favors the loud, not the wise. It rewards conformity over originality and distraction over contemplation. Social life in its common form isn't designed for the deep thinker. It demands energy without depth, presence without sincerity, and performance without purpose. Schopenhauer recognized that being around people meant absorbing their emotions, expectations, and noise. For an intelligent person, this can feel like carrying weights not your own. The solitude they seek isn't about escaping others. It's about returning to themselves. He wasn't alone in this view. Carl Jung, the great psychologist, once noted that the more introspective a person is, the more likely they are to withdraw from what he called the collective noise. To Jung, as to Schopenhauer, inner life held far more meaning than outer performance. Let me ask you something. How many times have you said yes to a social event only to regret it midway through? Not because the people were bad, but because your mind was yearning for quiet, books, ideas, music, and reflection. That isn't weakness. That's awareness. Schopenhauer warned that constant socializing dilutes the self. He believed that excessive company pulls us away from our essence, filling us with the distractions of others' thoughts, opinions, and desires. To live authentically, he believed, one had to cultivate what he called voluntary solitude. Not loneliness forced by rejection, but solitude chosen for its richness. Still, in a world that often equates being social with being healthy, this idea may sound radical, but is it? Modern research continues to back up what Schopenhauer intuited centuries ago. Studies in psychology suggest that highly intelligent individuals often report lower life satisfaction when their social needs are forced to match the average. They thrive not in constant connection, but in selective depth. So when people say you're too quiet, you're always alone, or you should socialize more, perhaps the real question is, what kind of connection are they offering? And does it nourish or drain you? In the next section, we'll dive even deeper into how this preference for solitude is not a defect, but a sign of a highly attuned mind. We'll explore what kinds of environments intelligent people naturally seek, and the surprising truth Schopenhauer reveals about the danger of shallow relationships. And remember, the final insight, the one that will truly shift your view of intelligence and isolation, is yet to come. When Schopenhauer emphasized the virtue of solitude, he was not merely speaking as a reclusive philosopher who preferred silence over company. He was identifying a pattern, one that spans centuries, cultures, and disciplines. The greatest minds of history, from Socrates to Leonardo da Vinci, from Newton to Nikola Tesla, were not social butterflies. They were by nature and necessity seekers of silence. But why? Because solitude provides space, not just physical, but mental. In that space, thoughts can stretch, ideas can bloom, and consciousness can deepen. Intelligent individuals do not fear this emptiness. They welcome it. For them, silence is not a void. It is a canvas. Schopenhauer observed that the masses are often driven by what he called the will to live, a blind, ceaseless drive for survival, pleasure, distraction, and reproduction. Most social activity, he argued, revolves around satisfying these instincts without questioning them. But the truly intelligent person does not live unconsciously. They analyze, reflect, and even rebel against these patterns. They are not content with simply existing. They want to understand why they exist and how to live in a way that aligns with deeper truths. This kind of questioning is not encouraged in casual conversation. In fact, it's often discouraged, which is why intelligent people grow tired of conversations that revolve around trends, gossip, and surface-level chatter. These exchanges are not bad, they're simply insufficient. Have you ever felt mentally hungrier after a conversation than before it began? That is the ache of the intelligent mind, starving for depth. Schopenhauer warned that such hunger cannot be satisfied in crowded rooms. It must be fed through books, long walks, music, reflection, and often solitude. He believed that a mind constantly distracted by social noise loses its capacity for philosophical depth. This is where modern psychology converges with his views. Research from institutions such as Yale and the London School of Economics has shown that individuals with higher intelligence often report a lower desire for social interaction, not because they're antisocial, but because their need for stimulation is met internally. Their imagination, curiosity, and self-dialogue are richer than most external interactions. Carl Jung once noted that the introverted intuitive type, which overlaps strongly with high intelligence, does not seek quantity in relationships. They seek quality. They would rather spend 2 hours in deep conversation with one person than 2 hours mingling with 20. And when they don't find that depth, they withdraw not out of bitterness, but self-preservation. This is crucial to understand. Intelligent solitude is not about rejection of others. It's about alignment with the self. The environments that foster this alignment tend to be slow, quiet, and reflective. Libraries, nature, creative studios, or simply a silent room. These are the sacred spaces of the intelligent. In them, the mind is free to wander, to question, to build connections that are often invisible in the noise of social life. And yet society tends to pathologize this preference. We are told that extroversion is healthy, that sociability equals success, that being alone is strange. But is it, or is it simply misunderstood? Schopenhauer turned this idea on its head. He believed that the more a person needs external stimulation to be content, the emptier their inner world likely is. He wrote, "Ordinary people merely think how they shall spend their time. A man of talent tries to use it." In other words, intelligent individuals do not fear boredom. They transcend it. They are not looking for entertainment. They are seeking meaning. And meaning is not something handed to you in a party or a loud room. It is something discovered alone, often painfully, but always profoundly. This doesn't mean intelligent people have no relationships. Quite the opposite. But their relationships tend to be fewer, deeper, and more intense. They seek people who challenge them, who question things, who are not afraid of silence. They bond over shared depth, not shared noise. And this is where the danger of shallow relationships comes in. Schopenhauer warned that mediocrity loves company. The average seeks the average. And for the intelligent person, blending into social groups out of obligation or conformity can become toxic. Not because the group is bad, but because it can pull them away from their deeper path. Have you ever found yourself dumbing down your speech just to fit in, or hiding your real thoughts because you knew they would be misunderstood or mocked? That's the tension Schopenhauer described. To preserve their inner richness, the intelligent person must be willing to walk alone. And that walk, though lonely, leads to a kind of inner clarity that crowds can never offer. Friedrich Nietzsche, deeply influenced by Schopenhauer, expanded on this idea. He believed that only through solitude can a person become who they truly are. He wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. This struggle is real because society, for all its benefits, also pressures individuals to conform, to belong, and to mirror others. But intelligent individuals often feel that belonging comes at the cost of authenticity. They would rather be misunderstood than be insincere. They would rather be alone than be deluded. This doesn't mean they never feel lonely. Of course they do. But even in loneliness, they find something honest, an opportunity for self-inquiry, for creation, for truth. And sometimes that's more nourishing than empty company. So the question becomes, is your solitude a sign of sadness or sovereignty? When you choose to be alone, not out of rejection, but alignment, you're practicing a form of philosophical integrity. You're saying, I value my mind. I value my peace. I value depth over distraction. And perhaps, like Schopenhauer, you've come to realize that true companionship is rare. and that until it's found, your own company will do just fine. In the next section, we'll explore the paradox of the intelligent mind, that while it often avoids social life, it also carries a deep yearning for connection, but of a very specific kind. We'll examine how this yearning shapes creativity, emotional intelligence, and even spiritual insight. And of course, the final part of this video will deliver the most profound realization, one that ties everything together in a way that may forever change how you understand solitude, intelligence, in your own inner journey. What if I told you that solitude for the intelligent mind is not only a refuge from noise, but also a vessel for a rare kind of connection? This is the paradox Schopenhauer helps us confront. Intelligent people may avoid superficial social life, yet they often possess a deeper capacity for connection than most. But the connection they seek isn't casual, it's sacred. Behind the silence and distance, there exists a longing, not for crowds, but for kindred spirits. Not for popularity, but for understanding. They may go days without speaking to anyone, yet carry an inner ache, a yearning to be seen, not for their words, but for their essence. This type of connection is incredibly rare. That's why intelligent people are often alone, not because they hate people, but because shallow company only deepens their sense of isolation. In fact, studies in psychology and neurology have shown that intelligent individuals process relationships differently. They are more sensitive to emotional nuance, more attuned to inconsistencies in behavior, and more affected by inauthenticity. What seems like a harmless conversation to most may leave them feeling drained or even betrayed if they sense a lack of depth or sincerity. That's why they gravitate toward those few who speak the same emotional and intellectual language. Carl Jung described this phenomenon as the meeting of two souls, and he said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." For intelligent individuals, this is the goal, not interaction, but transformation. So, how does this affect their emotional life? Many people mistakenly assume that introversion or solitude means emotional detachment, but often the opposite is true. Intelligent people feel more, not less, but they channel those feelings inward, through thought, through creativity, through introspection. This is why so many great artists, writers, and philosophers throughout history lived in semi-isolation. Think of Emily Dickinson, who wrote thousands of poems yet rarely left her home, or Franz Kafka, whose internal world was so vast it spilled over into literature that still haunts us today. These were not people running away from life. They were engaging with it at a depth too intense for everyday interaction. And this brings us to an important realization. For intelligent individuals, solitude is not the absence of connection. It is the refinement of it. In solitude, they form deep relationships with ideas, with art, with memory, with future visions. They may sit in a room alone for hours, but in their mind, they are in dialogue with Schopenhauer, with Jung, with the universe itself. And sometimes these internal conversations are more profound than anything a dinner table can offer. This also explains their heightened creativity. Solitude is a crucible for innovation. It allows space for original thought that is not filtered by group opinion or social expectations. Intelligent people often experience a flow state in isolation where their mind stretches beyond limitations and discovers new perspectives. Albert Einstein once said, "The monotony and solitude of a quiet life stimulates the creative mind." He wasn't exaggerating. Studies have shown that solitude enhances both divergent and convergent thinking, two critical components of creativity. But solitude is not without danger. Left unchecked, it can become a prison instead of a sanctuary. Intelligent individuals, because they live so fully in their minds, can sometimes spiral into overthinking, melancholy, or alienation. This is where emotional intelligence becomes essential. True self-awareness isn't just knowing your thoughts. It's understanding your emotions, needs, and limits. Schopenhauer himself struggled with this balance. While he embraced solitude, his writings reveal a man who wrestled with bitterness and a deep sense of existential despair. That's the shadow side of high intelligence. It sees too clearly the flaws in the world, the illusions of society, and the cruelty of fate. And without emotional grounding, this clarity can become unbearable. But when paired with emotional wisdom, intelligence becomes a tool not just for understanding the world, but for transcending it. So, what kind of connection do intelligent individuals truly seek? Not entertainment, but resonance. They want conversations where masks fall off, where both people are willing to be honest, curious, and vulnerable. They want silence that's comfortable, not awkward. They want relationships that respect their inner space, not demand their attention. And when they find that, whether in a friendship, a partnership, or even a piece of art, they come alive. That connection nourishes them more than 100 superficial ones ever could. That's why many intelligent people report feeling most connected, not at parties, but while reading a book that puts their own unspoken thoughts into words, or walking in nature and feeling the universe speak without sound, or creating something, a poem, a melody, a theory, that finally expresses what's been buried inside them for years. This isn't a rejection of people. It's a different way of relating. But it's also a harder path, because the world is not built for depth. It's built for speed, distraction, and surface. And intelligent individuals often find themselves swimming against the current, choosing reflection over reaction, meaning over popularity, and solitude over noise. And yet in doing so, they discover something most never will, a profound inner freedom. Because once you stop seeking validation from crowds, you become your own mirror. Once you stop fearing silence, you begin to hear your true voice. Once you stop needing constant interaction, you start choosing intentional connection. And this, perhaps, is what Schopenhauer meant when he spoke of solitude not as exile, but as liberation. In the final part of this video, we will uncover the most powerful truth of all, the secret reason why intelligent people not only prefer solitude, but need it to fulfill their purpose. A revelation so profound it reframes loneliness, not as a void, but as the birthplace of greatness. Now we arrive at the truth Schopenhauer hinted at, but never fully articulated, a truth that echoes not only through his work, but through the lives of many of the greatest minds in history. It's this: the solitude of the intelligent is not just a preference. It is the crucible of their purpose. Because deep intelligence does not exist simply to analyze the world. It exists to transform it. And transformation, true, lasting transformation, cannot come from noise. It comes from stillness, from introspection, from facing the inner world with such clarity and courage that what emerges is not just knowledge, but wisdom. This is what Schopenhauer was really pointing to. To be intelligent is not just to think more. It is to feel deeper, to see sharper, and to carry the burden of consciousness that others often escape through distraction. And solitude, that's where this burden is purified into insight. It is in the quiet hours when no one is watching, when there are no roles to play, when the mask drops, that the intelligent mind faces its raw truth. And in that moment, something extraordinary happens. The chatter fades, the false identities fall away, and what remains is essence. This essence is what the world needs. But here lies the paradox. The world demands it, but rarely understands it. Society praises intelligence when it produces results, technology, innovation, money, but often fears it when it questions norms, exposes illusions, or speaks uncomfortable truths. That's why the intelligent are so often forced to walk alone, because they are not here to reinforce the world's illusions. They are here to pierce them. But this piercing clarity requires solitude. It requires space to think without manipulation, to feel without interruption, and to imagine without ridicule. It's in that sacred space that new ideas are born. Ideas that shake foundations, break cycles, and reveal new paths. Let's not forget that most of the people who changed the course of history were solitary in nature. Jesus went into the desert. Buddha meditated under the Bodhi tree. Newton secluded himself during the plague. Kafka wrote in the silent hours of the night. Beethoven, going deaf, composed his greatest works in total isolation. They were alone, but they were not empty. They were becoming, and that is the final truth. For the intelligent person, solitude is not the end of the road. It is the beginning of creation, a laboratory for ideas, a temple for truth, a sanctuary where the soul begins to speak in its real voice. Schopenhauer once said, "It is difficult to find happiness within oneself, but it is impossible to find it anywhere else." This is the most powerful revelation of all, that solitude is not loneliness, it is alignment. That social withdrawal is not weakness, it is refinement. That distance from the world is not exile, it is the place from which a new world can be envisioned. But this journey isn't easy. It takes courage to turn down invitations that don't align with your soul. It takes strength to sit in silence when the world tells you to entertain yourself. It takes faith to believe that your inner life is not a prison, but a portal. And most of all, it takes wisdom to recognize that you are not broken for needing solitude. You are simply awake. You are awake to the beauty that only silence reveals, to the truth that only solitude can unlock, and to the calling that only depth can answer. So the next time you find yourself craving quiet, withdrawing from noise, or choosing thought over talk, don't apologize. Honor it, because in a world that constantly pulls you outward, your decision to go inward may be the most revolutionary act of all.